Good morning and welcome. This is our Saturday morning cybersecurity webinar. Everyone is asked to participate. Everyone's allowed. You don't have to have your membership card to be here. This is just something that we do every Saturday, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Go to freeconferencecall.com and the meeting ID is CS-Sensei. CS-Sensei for CyberSecurity Sensei. So good morning. This is going to be fun this morning. Our mentor Chris is going to talk to us a little bit about this latest thing that hit the news, and that was in reference to a $1.3 million, actually it was a 1.2 billion euro fine against Facebook's parent company Meta. So Chris, you want to talk about it and we will go from there.
Yes, so this article was presented to me by Scotty through a direct message in Facebook asking if I knew anything about GDPR, was familiar with it. And I'm somewhat familiar with GDPR, mostly with topics related to what's on the certification exams. And a couple of questions they give you to practice is what European privacy regulation is used to protect citizens kind of situation, and the answer is GDPR. But I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about what this means from a cybersecurity perspective, especially in the managed service providers. What's going on is the United States has a surveillance program, or a program that would look at different people in the United States. It has trickled down into the European area where European citizens are involved, and that caught the attention of a couple countries in the European Union that goes, no, nope, don't do that. This is anti-GDPR. Oh, by the way, here's a $1.3 billion fine to pretty much say cease and desist and stop, and this is the cost it had to our citizens. And GDPR is a privacy requirement, and I pulled up the website of having different requirements that GDPR has asked for businesses and organizations to follow. And on this website, they show you who's subject to GDPR and what are the requirements for it. And they have 7 guiding principles. And this gets into very interesting study material for your different certification exams, but also to help you understand why GDPR was put in place in the first place. One of the first of the 7 is lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. They want to make sure that there's a compliance factor to it, and if that compliance is within the lawful areas. So there's a consent, contract, legal obligation, vital interest, public task, and legitimate interest. Those 7 are needed to have a basis for the GDPR. And it's a protection of personal data. One of the unique things I'm getting out of this is not necessarily a geographical protection. It is your citizenship. Any European citizen is being protected by GDPR no matter where they are in the world and what they log into. And they go to other factors here. There's a purpose to it. So collecting personal data needs to have an intended purpose. And you need to announce it ahead of time to the European Union citizens in order to have that data, in order for you to use that data. It needs to be minimized. You cannot collect everything in your mama about a person. So you can't have Scotty Ward lives in Arizona and then go about who's the family and everything that Scotty owns and all the way up to the china cabinet behind him. It needs to they need to have some key measures. It needs to be adequate data. It needs to be relevant. And it needs to be very limited. They don't want a company like Meta collecting everything. One of the greatest shows I can recommend for our mentees that's on Netflix is called The Great Hack. The Great Hack goes into the 2016 election and a company called Cambridge Analytica and the collection of data that they had with social media and how they influenced the election based off of that collection of data to help a certain candidates win. Great to watch and great to understand the dark side of social media and why you probably should be very careful what you share. Accuracy, make sure data is accurate. Very limited on the storage. They don't want you to have terabytes and terabytes of data. Only have that amount of storage, the amount of storage you need to do what you need to do for your business. Very important, protecting that data with its integrity and confidentiality. If you're going to have data of EU citizens, you need to make sure it's the correct data. Nothing's changed about it. And you also need to make sure it is secured and encrypted. And finally, and this is the best part of the GDPR in my opinion, have someone to be held accountable for that data. And it gets into different aspects of data privacy, people who handle the data controller, and the data protection officer. There's actually a few objectives in the Security Plus about those two roles in protecting data and securing data. And
can I ask a sort of a clarifying question?
Yes.
Let's say I am a service provider and I own a company that does business internationally, let's say including with EU clients. And I'm headquartered in Milwaukee. If these EU clients get on my system to do the things that they could literally be paying for, let's say I have a news gathering role or responsibility. That's my business, is gathering news and allowing people to come in and get that information and share it. If any of the information that I have is concerning any citizen who is part of any country that is a member of the GDPR, of the EU, then these GDPR rules apply to that individual's data on any system worldwide, including mine. Is that a way of thinking about it?
It is a way of thinking about it, correct, yes.
So from a user standpoint,
that U.S. company has to notify the European Union citizen or the citizens that are involved.
Right.
Here's the data that we have. Here's the data that we collect. You have options to not engage.
Opt out. Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's not opt out, as I understand it, because it begins with consent. The EU citizen must agree that their data can be used.
Correct. Yes, and they get to pick which data. From my understanding.
So let me ask, one of those weird questions. Couldn't I just satisfy this all with a logon warning banner that basically says, hey, if you're on our system, we're keeping track of your data. If you click OK, you consent to this and agree to use our services.
I had a rough time finding a website that did that, but yes.
Yeah, I shared a number of months ago a website that I found was out somewhere outside of the U.S., and they had this big monster warning at the bottom, and it basically said, because some of this data traverses the United States networks and servers and storage sites, the United States, now here's where we're going to get into some people may not agree with this, but oh well. The U.S. makes sure that they can identify and classify and form information on anyone that could have a negative impact on the United States national interests.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically say, for example, the NSA surveils inside the United States to find somebody who's planning on blowing up a bridge, or the Twin Towers, or something like that. When people are planning to do something against the United States, the U.S. wants to know about it from a national interest and a national defense standpoint. But Google, or any of these other groups, the companies that get all this data, they do it for advertising. They do it for being able to say, in the southeast of the United States, this many people are interested in this type of information, so that they can literally target their ad campaigns to particular, down to the zip code level, if you will. And the U.S. says it's for national interests, for making sure Homeland Security is good. But for corporations, it could be business interests. How is it that Google Chrome is free? How is it that your Gmail account is free? How is it that your Hotmail account and your Yahoo account and all those things where you do your email is free? They do it because they want to be able to take your information, and this has happened to me. I have been standing around doing something in my house and talk, or online with you, and I talk about something like lemon cake, and the next thing I know, within the next 24 hours, I'm seeing ads on my browser for bloomin' cake companies. So that is targeted advertising based on my personal activities and movement. It's not designed to spy on me per se, but in the end, it really is for a business standpoint. So both of those are involved in what the EU calls the GDPR, and the restrictions and prohibitions. Bottom line, as I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the citizen owns everything related to that citizen.
Right.
Is that a way of thinking about it?
Great way to think about it, yes. Mm-hmm.
And if you take it and store it in an unencrypted fashion, or you use it in, let's say you're doing analytics, and you are now performing analytics on, let's say, two groups of people. One is somebody who is not a member of the EU, and the other is a member who is a member of the EU, a citizen within any one of those EU countries. And so you, as a service provider, have to be able to segregate those two and store them and grant access to them and use them in a manner that GDPR has specified. Right?
Yep. Yes.
So Meta is now under the gun. They're the biggest, I would say, the biggest company doing this. So they've had the largest fine, but this goes all the way down to, let's say, Target. What if somebody is in an EU country and buys an umbrella from Target? The information about that transaction and where it came from and where it's being delivered, perhaps, all have to be protected according to GDPR regulations, and it is not public information. It is not information that is made available simply because you did it on my servers. Is that, am I along the right lines?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So from a security standpoint, let's try and roll this in, because I think it's incredibly important. If Meta wants to totally comply with GDPR, Meta has to enact lots of rules,
Yep.
but it gets down to the citizen level of privacy information rather than like Google has done for years, or Yahoo, or any of those companies, where they take it all in and then they start doing analysis on it. The information that comes in for EU citizens has to be gathered differently, has to be stored differently, has to be used differently, and has to request permission from that citizen to do so.
Yep. Yep.
That's scary, man.
Mm-hmm.
So how, let's say you're a service provider. How do you do that? How do you make sure that you're not violating GDPR rules, and you could have the next big fine levied against you, thinking that data is data and users are users, and it's all important, but GDPR, how long has GDPR been around? Do you know?
Offhand, no, I don't.
Okay, I know it's been a number of years, but GDPR has basically said privacy is at the citizen level. And
Scotty, April 14th.
What's that? 14?
April 14th, 2016.
2016. Okay.
Yep.
So it's been around for 7 years. And they mentioned that Meta, the parent company for Facebook, could escape this fine, but only if in the next 6 months they remove all client privacy data from all their systems that are operating in the United States. Every EU citizen data, logons, geographic access information, website ordering information, their browsing preference, if you go and look on Facebook, it now does a whole lot of TikTok videos, what you view and all that has to be segregated from everybody else. And what's to prevent another country from enacting the same laws? And so now you've got GDPR and you've got South African laws that are formed after the same ideas as GDPR, or Lithuanian, or Russian. What if Russia says something about GDPR? And oh, by the way, Russia will only say it for people who aren't Russian citizens. And this is something, I think it's important for us to understand this. Communist countries, okay, Russia, Cuba, China, North Korea, there may be a couple others, but those are the main players. Communist countries, one of their big differences between them and other countries, let's say non-communist countries, is that in a communal approach, everything is owned by and managed by and run by the people. Okay, that sounds like privacy. That sounds like individual citizens. But the difference is the collective group that we call the people is literally the Russian government or the Chinese government or whatever. So we talked about this in reference to TikTok, the ban on TikTok. Why is the U.S. banning some little thing that shows, I want to watch cats dancing or something on my phone on TikTok. What's the big deal? The challenge is that in the United States, they have the ability for a citizen to have their basic information, again, national interests make a difference, but their basic information is considered theirs, and the only reason a federal government entity would get involved is if they think you're spying on them, or you're planning to do another Oklahoma City bombing or something like that. And they require warrants.
Or Scotty, much more middle, but much more damaging. Influence a presidential election that's coming up in going to be a year right now. Yeah, it'll be a year.
Right. False advertising. Misleading information that is designed to make people react in a particular manner. If you think about it, advertising, that's what advertising is. Buy a Buick, you deserve this perfume, and all those sorts of things. That is what they do. They make you want to do what makes them money. It's advertising, and these advertising companies have spent buku dollars learning how I'll say any customer is triggered, how their ambitions get involved, how their desires get involved. And like you were saying, it was used, what was it called? The movie?
The Big Hack.
The Big Hack. About the 2016 presidential election, where I'm going to second guess what the movie's about, where Russian interests went in to try and steer citizens to vote or not vote for certain people based on what Russia wanted the outcome to be. So privacy, it all begins with privacy. In America, there are certain protections, such as in order for them to surveil you, let's say do a wiretap or whatever, they require a warrant issued by usually a federal judge. In communist countries, the people, i.e. the president or the prime minister or the whatever, own you and everything in there. The citizens are part of the people, and whoever is in charge of the people owns the people within the people. So, and I gave this example several times. China is the host company for TikTok. Russia is the host company for Kaspersky. For example, there was a ban on using Kaspersky security products on United States government systems for the same reason. The Russian government or the Chinese government can walk into that company and say, give us the data. And the company must do so, or, worst case scenario, the president of the company will be jailed, like with Jack Ma. Privacy is thought of very differently in communist countries compared to capitalist countries. And then the U.S. throws that surveillance twist in there as well and says, we don't want another 9/11. So, it is our responsibility to make sure that nobody else is cooking up a scheme to destroy United States federal government interests. Thoughts? I mean, it's just you and me here today, Chris, but what do you think about this?
It's a complicated matter. I want to say probably the best thing for our mentees to think about is, first off, don't confuse security with privacy. There are two different things.
Very
I read,
good. Yep.
read a LinkedIn post saying that you can have security without privacy, but you can't have privacy without security. And once you understand that they're two different things, you'll start to understand it a little bit better of what's going on in this situation. GDPR is there. I think it's the greatest thing that Europe did to protect citizens' data, and it's pretty much say, hey, European Union citizens, you own this data. You take the control, and you decide what's good for them to sell, and what's not good for them to sell. But add on the fact that we're trying to protect ourselves from these terrorists, from doing another 9/11 type plot, gets very tricky. In fact, a lot of the comments on the news article was interesting. Meta pretty much protecting themselves and saying, "Well, we're doing it. Why aren't you bothering other people who are doing it as well?"
Right.
And this is a bigger issue than us by ourselves trying to fix it. Which, I'm sorry, cop out, corporate talk. Sorry, opinion off your soapbox, Chris. This one I like. The computer and communications industry effectively makes the way internet works illegal, from video conferencing and browsing the internet to the processing of online payments. That decision that was made. And that's a very interesting comment. So if we're not allowed to transfer data transatlantically from, let's say, a European country, a European client, let's go back to your example, Scotty. If we're not allowed to collect data on people and get data from people in Europe, and we have to protect that left and right or face consequences, you pretty much said that any data transfer at all along that wire between Europe and the United States, that's a valid point. That decision is now said that is illegal in the end. And you have to be very careful what you collect about European citizens, any data, and that's not just any textual data. That is video feeds. That's you and I talking to each other. If you're sitting in Germany and I'm sitting in Columbia, Maryland,
sure,
that's data that's going through that wire.
Well, okay, I'm going to play, crazy advocate here. That even means a Zoom call with somebody in Greece. That the information in that Zoom call, because it involves a Greek citizen, and as I understand it, Greece is a member of the EU, I think, just off the top of my head, the information specific to that Greek citizen is protected under GDPR rules and can't be stored where it can be gotten to by, let's say, U.S. surveillance interests like the NSA. GDPR is basically putting up a individual level firewall against surveillance activities, right? Wow. If I were to try and prognosticate where we're going with this, they would have to store data locally within that specific country for that specific citizen and not let it get out into the world. So we're now talking wow, I don't even know how this can work. But I do remember, I'm getting lost in the depth of this. I do remember the Meta legal spokesperson, when the fine was levied, Meta came back and said, we are all struggling with this. In order to meet the requirements of the GDPR, he said, the industry is trying very hard to comply with this. And I think he said, it's unfortunate.
This one.
Yeah. And said it's unfortunate. Yeah, we've been disappointed to have been singled out. Well,
corporate at the moment that hey, it's kind of like you get a group of kids and you call out one kid, but wait a minute, if Johnny did it.
Yep.
You call me guilty, Johnny's just as guilty because he was doing it along with me. Meanwhile, Johnny's a third grader and you're a sixth grader.
Right. The biggest bully is the one that the target's on here. Yep. Yeah. Wow. And again, if you think about it, privacy is you, things related to you, activities related to you. And I'm just speculating here, would that also apply to things like international travel, where I go? What about the passport system that says, oh, this person came in from Spain? That's information related to an EU citizen. Passport information. And he checked into St. Kitts in the U.S. Virgin Islands. That's U.S. information about an EU citizen that has to be stored according to these privacy rules.
Great. One of the things we can tell our mentees that are searching for their first position in cybersecurity, this a great entry-level job that's not necessarily listed. It's called governance, risk, and compliance.
Oh, yeah.
There are companies who want to be compliant and are striving to be compliant, and they'll hire people who understand or at least have a working fundamental knowledge of these laws to help the technicians make sure, technicians and management understand what it needs to be compliant, and provide suggestions on what you need to do to your systems to be compliant.
Right. And I think the big challenge right now is that Meta was the first, Meta was the biggest, and even Meta does not yet have the path to happiness, to how to make Facebook and anything related to Facebook, owned by Meta, compliant. I don't think they yet have a roadmap for how to get there. So
those challenges. Right. Hey, we're trying to be compliant here. What do you guys want us to do? Yeah.
Right. And it is, I think it's sort of implied that this whole business model of we're providing this stuff to you for free in return for getting information about you, maybe anonymously, but maybe not anonymously, that GDPR says, no, that's not allowed. Wow. So I agree with you. From a student standpoint, from a mentee standpoint, we all need to keep an eye out for GDPR and Meta. They are going to forge the way over the next few months for how data is used internationally. And the internet superhighway, where a packet of data can go anywhere, just may not be the case anymore, because let's run it down to a data packet level. If the data packet contains information related to this citizen, it can't traverse a network where U.S. surveillance may be watching that network. Just that data packet. So TCP/IP now becomes, I think the favorite word I've come up with now is micro-segmented away from these global thoughts. The internet was designed to where any data could go anywhere, and that was a good thing. You could get information from a Swahili library or a library for your European ancestors, and that may be controlled and restricted and not available until you agree to treat it in a certain fashion. This gets down to how my data is stored on my device.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big deal. So the Wild West of the TCP/IP and the internet and storage anywhere where it's cheap. Let's say the U.S. Meta uses monstrous data centers. But if the data centers in the U.S. laws require that if somebody comes in with a search warrant executed by a federal judge, they get that information. EU and the GDPR has said not unless the citizen agrees. My mind is blown.
I was looking up to see if there was a easy cybersecurity law course or kind of collection of courses that a mentee can take a look at. There are a few, probably some at cost, some probably cheap, but GRC would be a nice way to get your foot in the door in cybersecurity.
Yeah, I would agree.
Mm-hmm.
I would agree. There are lots of smart people that are trying to work this out, but once they do, then there is going to when the GDPR agrees on a data protection model that's going to work, and companies can figure out how to do it in a manner to where they still make money, that will become the model for everyone, and that's going to be how you do it. So yeah, this is going to change a lot of things in reference to the citizen. The citizen is first. Yeah, we talked about biometrics a few weeks ago. Biometric data, that's me. My fingerprint is me. And therefore, if I were an EU citizen of any of the EU member countries, how many are there? 12 member countries, something like that. That biometric information can't be stored unless I agree to it, and it has to be protected in a manner that meets GDPR requirements, not necessarily where it's stored, the country of storage requirements. Wow. So what do you think? Should we all go back to writing letters,
Yeah,
putting a post stamp on it and mailing it to each other?
Yep.
Wow. Very, very interesting. Do you think this will, what do you forecast?
Ooh, my forecast is how the United States is going to respond and how Meta is going to respond.
Right, so you're talking the U.S. nationally and corporations from a business standpoint.
One of my items is having a federal regulation ourselves with our citizens' privacy. I think we've pointed that down to the states. There's a few states that have a data privacy regulation. California comes to mind offhand. I'm not sure about other states. That's further research, but I would probably wait to see how both Meta and the United States government responds.
Yeah.
with their interest before I can sit there and have predictions. That being said, what we can take back publicly or take home, there are, and I mentioned this in our DMs back and forth, we talk about your digital footprint.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the CS-Sensei videos was about what you have to be very careful what you're putting up on social media about you.
Mm-hmm.
It was more geared towards behavior, showing versus actual protecting yourselves. Now you have to sit there and think, well, what do I post that will reveal more about me, and be very careful about it. And until Meta or United States government makes decisions, I'm not going to expect Meta to make any decisions. They're going to do what's good for their company.
Right.
United States government, I don't know. The finger seems to be point back down to the states, to have the states make privacy laws. Some of that's starting to happen with different states doing TikTok bans automatically. Federal government's done TikTok bans too. But an actual privacy regulation that says that, hey, U.S. citizen, you're responsible for your data. You get to call out these companies to say, erase everything about me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or we're going to come back and take legal action. We'll
Right.
see. Mm-hmm.
I'm just looking at something from a PC Mag did this back in 2022. Now, this sounds like Meta is being singled out, but it's not true. I'm looking at this. In 2022, Amazon was fined $740 million. Instagram was fined $402 million. I think that's WhatsApp was fined $223 million. Google was fined $89 million. At that time, Facebook was fined $60 million. Then Google was fined another $60 million. Then Google was fined another $50 million. So we're not talking about a single fine. We're talking about companies have been struggling with this for a long time, and the EU has been basically saying you are breaking our laws, and therefore you are being fined to do this. Now, the purpose of a fine, as I understand it, is, if you think about it, it's to change the behavior. In other words, what you've done in the past, we are spanking you for that, but we are making this fine significant enough to where you change and meet our requirements. And so these fines could keep ratcheting up until somebody like Meta comes up with the perfect plan for doing this. Maybe, and I'll just speculate, maybe it's individual level encryption, citizen level encryption. I don't grant access to this, and so they say, okay, well, you can't get on our server. And oh, by the way, I don't think it is going to be, well, obviously, it's not sufficient enough to have log-on warning banners that say there's no expectation of privacy here. That has not stopped these fines.
Scotty, I have an unpopular opinion.
Go ahead.
I believe that Americans need to get out of the mindset of the I want it now and I want it immediately without facing the consequences of what I want it now gets you. When you sat there and said, hey, you accept this privacy policy in order to access our services, a lot of times we don't read that. It's a lot like the banner that you talk about. And we said, nope, who's giving that service now? I don't care if you're going to sell all the information you have about me. I want to watch my Netflix show.
Yeah,
I got it for privacy policy.
My cat videos.
the thought process here is understanding what is our data and how it's being used and why it's being used by different people. And
incredible.
Yep. I would highly recommend watching The Great Hack.
Yep, The Great Hack. I plan to go find out about it. And you said it's on Netflix?
It's on Netflix. The last time I checked, it was on Netflix. Yes.
Okay. All right. Wow, this is incredible stuff. I don't think we need to do any more today. I think this is a topic in itself, that these fines are going to continue and they're going to get even higher until a solution is made that satisfies GDPR and companies can use and still stay in business. And then, oh, by the way, the U.S. surveillance interests, those are going to be a big deal as well. And I'll give a weird example, but there was a speculation that on 9/11, there were certain things that were going on that the U.S. government could not find out about because the individuals, and I'm going to use it, they weren't using cell phones, I don't believe so, but they were using things like radios that could encrypt. The bad guys, the bad people, the people that were planning nefarious activities, planning to kill us, as many U.S. citizens as they can, they were keeping that data away from U.S. surveillance, and it thwarted some surveillance gathering activities to where maybe had they had access, fewer people would have died. But now GDPR is basically saying we don't care. We don't care. The individual owns themselves, and the individual owns what they do. Oh, let me. Okay, I'm gonna bring this down to an absolutely absurd level. Street cameras, red light cameras. I don't consent to you recording me running a red light because I'm an EU citizen. Wow. And oh, by the way, consent, I noticed the numbering on that. Consent was number 1. It's not consent is implied. It's that consent must be obtained and granted. Crazy. You remember the sovereign citizens and the stuff about, I don't consent to being pulled over because I was speeding and driving without license or registration. I don't consent. Oh my. So, okay, this is tremendous stuff, Chris. Thank you for your research. In the end, this is going to make a big difference in the way we do business and the way security operates. Yep. Well, very cool. I'm glad you did this. Thank you. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to drop them. You can't do it in the comments on YouTube. I restrict comments on YouTube. But come on to our Facebook group, CS-Sensei, and it's all one word, CSSENSEI. CS-Sensei, come on to our group and join us. Have a conversation with us, and we will have a lot of fun talking about things like this. Again, the purpose of our mentorship is to help anyone, regardless of experience or education, get and keep cybersecurity entry-level jobs. And then what you do with it afterwards, the sky's the limit. Where you grow from within there, the sky's the limit. And we want to help everyone get into jobs that will be durable and very well paying. Anybody, we're here to help. Anything else, Chris?
Yeah, it's a lot more to research about this, and security, the security industry is a continuous learning, and just continue learning. That's all I can say.
Very good. You notice the sun's coming in now. it's 5:54 a.m. here in Arizona. So, okay. Appreciate it very much, Chris. I'm going to end the recording, but this was great stuff. Thank you again.